Okay, welcome back. Continuing on with our texture, I'm still building up that subdermal, the first subdermal layer, so just painting in that pinkish overall, over the entire arm. Once I'm happy with that, I'm going to test it and see what it looks like in max. So you can see on the model how this is looking. So I'm just looking at if I've got the muscles in the right position, if the veins are looking okay, if if the elbow bone is showing up as the elbow bone, and so on. And then I'm going to continue on with painting my texture. Okay, so that's pretty close to how I want it. So you can see that we can still see the backscattering through it. It's not completely obscuring what we've already created, but it is laying down a base. So I'm just going to tidy up my layers a little bit as well. So I'm creating a skin group, and then I'm going to create 3 groups within that as well. So one for the epidermis, one for the subdermal part, and one for the backscattering, just so that everything is nice and neat and I know what belongs to what. Okay, so I'm also trying to work as indestructively as possible. So where I need, where I'm going off the edges, like of the skin, I'm applying a mask to cut that back so I can adjust it later. With that done, I'm going to go in now and I'm going to start laying in some more color. So this is going to be a really colorful pass, because this will be a lot of what comes through on the skin and gives us variation throughout our skin tone. So I'm just adding a little bit more orange and a little bit more red to where the deepest part of the muscles are. I was just adjusting my brush to get a more of a scattering effect to my brush. So I'm using a really bright color here too to bring up that muscle. Where there is shadows, or where there is not shadows so much as where the more recessed parts, I guess would be the word. I'm going to use a bit of purple and a bit of dark blue in order to highlight the recesses in the arm, so around where the nook of the elbow is, and that sort of thing. So this is going to be quite colorful in this particular pass. On bony areas again, we're going to put in just that little bit of yellow. So we don't want to go overboard with the yellows, and particularly the purples either, because these will show up as being darker or being in shadow a little bit more once we've finished our epidermis. Okay, you can see what has increasing the scattering on my brush has done. So the effect that it's achieving, it's giving a speckled or a blotted type of look to it, and that's what I want to go for. I want to get something that's kind of almost mottled. So this will add texture and a little bit more to our skin layer. So again, not forgetting our hands, adding the color on our hands as well. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that now. So what I'm going to do is work on the next layer of our subdermis, and that's the subcutaneous layer. So this is a tissue that is between our muscle and our skin, and it's just to add, again, a little bit more texture. So I've created my own brush with this one. So I've used an alpha that kind of looks like veins or something. I just found on the internet, and I'm going to use that to create the subcutaneous layer. So you can see my brush here. I'm just going to use a very pale white or pale yellow, and then I'm going to use a scatter brush to apply this. So you can see as I lay it down that it creates almost like a veiny type effect to the texture. So this helps bring everything together again underneath the one skin tone, I guess would be the right way to say it. With that done, I'm going to go back in and lightly put the veins back into our arm, so just the big ones again, and I'm not going to make them too dark. So it might be easier just to turn off my subcutaneous layer to do this, but just painting in those veins again. So along with the deep blue veins as well, I'm going to put in some of the red ones as well that are closer to the surface. Okay, so now with that done, I'm going to use a very light pink again and my scatter brush that I used to originally lay down the wash, and I'm going to put another wash layer on top. So this will be another layer by itself on top of the subdermis, and this is painted over the entire thing again, so very light opacity. It's just to bring all the colors together and make them all look like they're all part of the one thing. Okay, so that's coming in along nicely. So again, I'm not blocking out any of my subdermal layer that I've already painted. I'm just trying to tie the colors in together. Okay, now with that done, I can move on to my epidermis. So I'll create another group within my skin layer, and I'll call it epidermis, and I'll add a new layer, which is the skin color. So the epidermis is basically, this is the outer skin, so the skin tone, the skin color that you'll see, this is where it'll be applied. So I've picked the color that is in my palette that I used for Selena's skin tone, and I'm just going to start applying that over my subdermal layer. Now again, I'm using a light opacity and my scatter brush, and I'm just going to build that up. So this will almost hide most of the subdermal layer. It is what will be seen. Obviously, you don't see through your skin, and when you sit there on a day-to-day basis, you cannot see through yourself. But creating those other layers, the subdermal and the backscattering, will help us when we create our shader in UDK. So it'll help sell the realism of our skin. So when light is shining behind our ears, sometimes you can see if there is sun behind somebody. If they're standing, if you're in front, you can kind of see that the ears look really red, and that's the blood vessels being highlighted by the sun. So that's what those things, those layers are there that we created to simulate. So I'm just building this up on the arm, so just painting in the texture, the color of Selena's skin as over the top as we work. So there we go. Okay, you can see we've pretty much obscured all of the subdermal layer that we've painted. So now if I save that and we go into Max, you can see that her skin tone is now applied. There is some variation still showing through because of the subdermal layer that we created, but she's pretty much the color that we expect it to be now. So now what we can do is we can add some more detail to the skin. So going back in with some light oranges and slight reds, we can start to paint in again where that muscle is. So just brushing over the top ever so lightly, just to add a little bit of variation and definition where that muscle, the muscle tone is. Here I'm going in on the fingertips and just adding a little bit more red. So if you look at your hands, you can see that they're just a little bit more red around the fingertips. So I'm just adding that in as well. So this is also where you would want, if you wanted any freckles or any moles or anything of that sort on your character, you would add them on in this layer as well. Again, put it in its own layer within the group. That way, if you change your mind or you want to increase or decrease the amount of freckles that he or she has, you can go back and change it at a later date without causing too much effort for yourself. I'll also add just a little bit of that lighter color from the skin tone as well, the skin tone palette that we created. Okay, that's starting to look pretty good. If we go back into Max, we can see how that's looking on the model, and it's starting to look quite nice. So again, I'm just using a cell shaded type of cell there, just the lighting thing, so I can get rid of the shadows and see what the actual texture was looking like. Looking for seams again, to if there any seams were showing up, and then I can go back into Photoshop and I'll apply my AO again since I turned it off. And I'm just deleting for the fingernails here. I'm going to delete everything from the subdermis, the epidermis, and those layers. So I only want that light skin color for the nails, so it'll look like she's not really wearing nail polish, but it also helps differentiate the nail from the skin. With that done, we need to start to work on our eye. To do that, we need to actually be able to see our eye. So open up the head or your face layer. I'm going to create an alpha so I can see through the outer shell of the eye where the light will be applied. So what I've done here is I've created an alpha channel, and then I'm just going to make sure that my eye area is selected. I'll make that black in the alpha channel, and everywhere else will be white. Now, anything that's white will be opaque, anything that's black will be transparent. I've then just saved out that one, just that alpha channel, and I'm going to apply that to the opacity channel in my layer here. So I'm just making a copy of the alpha channel here. so that I can save it out as a TGA. So this is only temporary until I get to the head texture. So I'm making sure it's 32-bit as well, because a 24-bit won't save out the alpha channel. And then I'm going into max, and I will add that to my opacity channel so that I can see through the eye. We'll do that in the next video.